Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hell Island. And on the show today, we have a very good and important lineup of stories for you. Michael Gove, the Leveling Up and Communities Minister in the government, is announcing on Thursday the specific organizations that will be affected by the new extremism definition. But thanks to The Guardian, we already have somewhat of an idea of what those organizations will be in the broader government's attempt to crack down on radical Islamic extremism. We have ex-Tory MP Lee Anderson defecting to Reform UK. That is said to be, a pretty big deal in the media wars and the narrative wars. We'll break down its actual kind of political impact as well. Also, it's been a bit of a while since we've had an episode, and in that time, George Galloway has been re-elected to Parliament, coming back to torment the British political establishment. We'll talk about his campaign, and we also have to break down the mystery. Where is Kate Middleton? And review her her art skills and photo editing skills as well. So we also have Myron joining us back again. Myron, thank you so much. This is actually, we're doing it second round because we had a little bit of technical difficulty just before, but it's very good to have you back and have your voice finally be heard on the recording, which is very good.
Yeah. They tried to silence. Kate Middleton tried to Photoshop me out of the first take, but you know what? She's not going to stop us. We're doing it again. We're doing it live.
That's right. All right. So very interesting stuff today. We have Michael Gove coming in this briefing to The Guardian, as they say. He is going to, and I do love that title that he has, the Leveling Up Secretary. Whenever I tell American politically inclined people about British politics, and they're like, Leveling Up Secretary. It's just it's a very cool name. But
it is sadly not our Secretary of State for video games. I wish it would be a much funner discussion if you would.
Yeah. I think America that. Just principally, America should have somebody focused on that more, just because we do have a lot of the same communities that need leveling up. I feel like throughout various parts of our country, as you do in yours. But getting to what he has to say about this, we saw coming in the wake of the Prime Minister's speech a few Fridays ago. There's this kind of the new framework about tackling counter extremism, the counter extremism strategy, which Gove says it's going to be targeting organizations that undermine British democracy, but he's unlikely to call out relatively mainstream groups such as Muslim Council of Britain or the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. I think the fact that Stop the War Coalition is left out of that could be a little interesting, and focus instead on smaller organizations such as CAGE, which after Hamas's 7th October attack on Israel said that Palestinians had the right to resist. So ministers are scrambling to finalize the proposals amid criticism from high-profile anti-extremism experts, including 3 former Conservative Home Secretaries that have come out and said, to be very, very careful about this. I personally, I'll wait in a moment, but I want to get your take on this, Myron. What is your what is your reaction to this law? How chilling or not chilling do you think it's going to be, just in terms of political expression here in the UK?
Well, I think that I think that the government's already done a lot to kind of harm political expression in this country through kind of the protest bills that Suella Babman and Peter Patel put through, and also beforehand broadening kind of the extremism definition to include stuff like anti-racism and anti-capitalist ideas. Which even if you're not an anti-capitalist like me, I think we can all agree everyone should have the right to kind of say those kind of crazy opinions, whether or not you think they're crazy or not, and have a public debate. I think that the fact that they are going after kind of fringe organizations probably means that it is going to be a lot more of a kind of virtue signaling kind of messaging of, look, we're cracking down on, this organization that we can clearly show is, crazy, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's disappointing because I think that actually a discussion does need to be had about kind of not necessarily the behavior of the people who go to those protests. The vast majority of them are, simply human beings who are being empathetic and are trying to show solidarity with the people who are suffering. But I think there is a question about the organizers, including Stop the War and, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, who I think consistently have shown that, they aren't simply up to organizing an event like this. I mean, a huge part of organizing protests is to make sure that it is on message, on track, and doesn't get kind of disrupted by kind of extreme actors. And they have consistently failed to do that. I mean, they have allowed people in to, dressed up as kind of Hamas soldiers with, placards that, many people in the Jewish community find anti-Semitic, find offensive. And, not only is that, simply bad organizing from, a very prominent organization, it also simply hurts the cause that they're trying to put forward, which is of a ceasefire, which is of helping Palestinians. So I think a conversation about these protests and about what we're doing to actually make sure that these protests represent the majority of people who go to them rather than a minority who goes there to stir up trouble. I think that discussion needs to be had, but I mean, I think the government right now isn't trying to have that discussion. I think it's trying to score cheap political points, which I think is sad.
Yeah, yeah, very, very rare. You see kind of like a very broader, nuanced political discussion in just any sort of political cultural conversation. It's always about some sort of political spinning, not too far from the top. But yeah, I think it is definitely we have seen some of the kind of, especially towards the earlier parts of the protests. I think we've seen some protests that have been happening, especially in kind of the late 2023 period. When this was kind of much newer, we have seen some kind of definitely some anti-Semitic signs. I think it was like really like one or two that happened to make my way into my attention. I don't know if there were more, but and I have been to a few Palestinian solidarity marches that are just, even the smaller one that I went to was just absolutely just massive. You could not see the ends of it both ways. Mm-hmm. And I think it is definitely a pretty, it's an important service that you do as a group like this, coordinating with the police, getting all these roads closed off, getting people, to go to things and having them show up and giving them a space and being that kind of middleman, for people can come out, protest in the way that they do and show their kind of dismay of it. And I think it is, it's definitely very easy for anyone to kind of, any bad actors to jump on, kind of get themselves filmed in kind of a context-free situation, and I'm sure there's a case that you can always make that a situation or a outfit like Stop the War Palestinian Solidarity Campaign can do a better job policing, a better job monitoring everyone. I think it's a very, very hard job. It's not a worthy conversation to have, but I do think, especially in the environment that we're in right now, with the conservatives just dying for any sort of wedge issue, any sort of community to demonize ahead of the election, you get into unless you're coming with very, very serious allegations that are well founded by evidence that you kind of present up front. I feel like you could one can very, very easily run the risk of putting these groups and under more and more legal scrutiny, and by and large without sufficient evidence, without sufficient justification, end up inhibiting a lot more people's right to protest. Of course, that we would be able to have it, this kind of broader conversation. I think if we were in a more chill, more respectful, kind of political environment. But as you said, I just don't think that's the environment that we're in at the moment.
I mean, I think you're right, sadly, but I do think that I think we should expect from our leaders the ability to kind of calm the situation down, and actually try to have those mature discussions. But sadly, the Tories, I mean, since these protests began, have basically had the opposite strategy of trying to whip up fear and hatred. And I think you're right about kind of using kind of extremism programs very liberally, especially when it comes to the Muslim population, because ever since the 9/11 attacks and the 7/7 attacks here in London, there's been a very, very long history of the government, infiltrating mosques and generally making the Muslim community feel uncomfortable, and that's why a lot of kind of former home secretaries, have actually written about this and about being against this, because actually that just leads to more radicalization. Mm-hmm. It leads to more distrust of the police, more distrust of authority, and that means actually when you do have a terrorist, when you do have an extremist, it's harder to report. So I mean, I absolutely agree that this is kind of just kind of playing politics, in my opinion, a very dangerous way. But I think still wish that I think that there should be at some point, maybe after this, kind of all of these protests and hopefully this war in Gaza is over, a better discussion on the left of, how do we actually protest these things? Because I think that, I know a lot of Jewish people personally who, personally feel unsafe when they go into central London when a protest like that is on. And I think that, again, that is absolutely not the intention of most people who go to those protests. I don't even think it's the intention of people who organize it. But I think that there is certainly a problem of, these organizers who are not amateurs, right? Like, this is Stop the War that organized the largest protest in, modern British history against the Iraq War. These people know what they're doing. But I think that they simply have not done a good enough job at, seeing someone with a Hamas flag and saying, listen, this is not your protest, this is not your place, please leave. Or seeing someone with an anti-Semitic banner and saying, listen, this is not your protest, this is not your place. And, it is their protest. They have the ability to do these things. It is not hard. So I think we need to have a conversation, but I think I'm just really sad that that conversation has been hijacked by the Tories to, basically persecute Muslims, which, Muslim hate crimes and Jewish hate crimes are already going up as they are. I mean, it really just is unneeded, I think.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't even think it's going to be, to a certain extent, even that politically effective, because I feel like for a culture war situation to work, you really do kind of have to have a kind of charismatic political figure, which obviously Rishi Sunak's not, and I think it's the reason why, Boris Johnson was able to do stuff like that so well. And also, you have to have a media environment that's really working in tight tandem with the Conservative Party to carry this stuff out, which, I think by and large, we can see the broader, I guess, right of center media in the UK just getting more and more skeptical of the Conservative Party, more and more willing to criticize, almost kind of, sensing, weakness there. But obviously, I think that does not mean that there aren't going to be incredible, detriments to the, the Muslim community by kind of the focusing of this bill. But not really just even the focusing of this bill, because not many Muslims are going to be in Cage or groups like that get maybe like prescribed by the government, but it also is going to just do the rhetoric, the general political culture. It will have those trickle down effects, which I'm sure you'll agree will be quite problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely kind of like, I think that organizations that do, I think organizations like Cage do, talk about, resistance when it comes to October 7th, which, in my opinion was, a brutal, not even in my opinion, but as fact, was a brutal slaughter of innocent people. I think that those people should definitely be, looked at and make sure that, ideas that normalize atrocities shouldn't spread. But I don't think that you do that by making it a political campaign issue, which is what the Tories are doing. And I think that, I think it's a dereliction of duty. I mean, this is about national security. It should not be an election pitch, especially when, as you said, it's probably not going to work because, if you're in Sunderland or, Glasgow or, in the home counties, you're not watching what's happening in central London every single weekend. Right? So it seems to be, a lot of risk for very little reward. And I think it just shows how desperate the Tories are and how little they actually care about governing and how a lot more they care about simply, whipping up fear and division in the hopes that, this will be the culture war that delivers them a majority, which I think is very likely.
Yeah, and they recently did have another blow to their, hopes of getting a majority. And that came in the form of Lee Anderson. He is the obviously former Conservative deputy chair. Recently lost the whip in the Conservative Party for the Islamophobic comments he made against essentially applying that Sidi Khan and a cabal of his Muslim mates are essentially running London at the moment. And that got him in a bit of trouble, but there was some speculation that because of his red wall standing and the fact that it wasn't like, are we really that offended about it anyway? Kind of get the vibe from some people in the Tory government and just general Tory ethos that he could have been probably brought back in before the election, but he has defected to Reform UK, handing the populist right-wing party its first MP and delivering a significant blow to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Definitely kind of a bad, just handing this kind of electoral and especially already elected face to Reform UK. Definitely going to be a big blow to Rishi Sunak. But do you think it's going to really deliver Reform UK the boost that it needs to really just kick into that conservative coalition more and more, and take them from what is already pretty bad defeat territory to really wipe out just absolute existential crisis territory?
I mean, I don't think that this is actually going to be that big of a issue in the election, partly because we've seen this before. I mean, but in the one up to the 2015 general election, you had, I think, two MPs defect to UKIP, Tory MPs defect to UKIP, and that was a big thing. And you had this whole kind of thing about whether UKIP's going to get 2 seats or 5 seats or 10 seats, and in the end, they actually lost most of the seats that they actually that had defected to them. Because fundamentally, the first past the post system always punishes smaller parties, whether they're on the extreme left or on the extreme right, or whatever the Lib Dems are this time of the week.
Or
right?
maybe the center left in a certain election as well. Change
Maybe,
UK. Yeah,
maybe. I mean, definitely.
like apes.
Gone but not forgotten. But I think definitely that I don't think it's going to have that big of an impact. Also because, I mean, there's this building narrative that was also building around the 2019 election that kind of, reform is just going to be vehicle for kind of disillusioned, right-wing kind of Tory voters that are going to go back, that are going to move away from the Conservatives. And, actually, as someone who's been campaigning in seats, in by-elections, I was up in Wellington, I was actually talking to some Reform UK voters. A lot of them actually aren't disillusioned Conservatives. They're people who, regardless, never vote because they don't like any politicians, they don't like any of the political establishment, and they're only really going to turn out to vote for reform because they're talking about immigration. So actually, and I think the stats in Welland actually showed us out that about only a third of reform voters were from the Tories. So actually, 2/3 of reform voters weren't this kind of disillusioned Tory voter. So I actually think, I mean, I think we're definitely going to see an increase in vote share. But I don't necessarily think you're going to see a huge electoral shift where, you get 10 Reform MPs or, I actually think Lee Anderson's probably going to lose his seat because, you're going to have a Tory candidate, you're going to have a Labour candidate, and that Tory candidate's probably going to have a lot of money behind them. I mean, they might not have as much ground support because, Lee Anderson, we used to call him 30p Lee, now we call him Free Party Lee because he's been in Conservatives, Labour, and Reform UK. So he's doing the trifecta. He'll be a Lib Dem soon, hopefully.
That would be interesting to see.
Yeah, and so I think he does have a history in that area and kind of in mobilizing support for him, regardless of what party he's part of. But I think that, I don't expect it to be a turning point in British politics. So maybe that's because every time someone defects to a far right party in the UK, maybe third time's the charm. But I'm a bit skeptical.
Yeah. It seems like he's definitely in for an uphill battle because Ashfield is red wall, has been Labour for kind of the definition of a very ancestral Labour seat. I mean, it just went Tory in 2019 for the first time, I believe, or second time like ever. I was just looking at before we went on, and so it seems like, and there's also you got the local Ashfield Independent Party, kind of being a bit of a force there, always running a pretty strong candidate. So a lot of stuff going on in that election, and hopefully, I'm sure you'll be hoping that Labour will be able to sneak through. Lee Anderson, I feel like, will probably be, a pretty solid, second or third maybe to that seat. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if, this is kind of a very, random kind of low stakes prediction, but I would not be surprised if the Tory loses to, Lee Anderson, given the way things are going and given the way, his ground support is. But that still doesn't really change too much about the broader likelihood that, as you say, it's going to be very hard with the first past the post system for the Reform Party to really make any ground, but also that at least the way I see it, that it is very likely that even like a 20-30% cut in some of these seats, maybe into the Conservative vote, as we really are starting to see with the, at least with the polling, with Reform being higher than ever, Conservatives being lower than ever, in any time past, it seems like it could be a really continued detriment to the Tories in just terms of the seats that they are able to win. And just essentially, as Lee Anderson said, I believe it was in January, let Sir Keir Starmer bring Labour back into number 10. So, I don't know if you see that as the boon to Labour that I do.
I mean, I think definitely. I mean, you'll remember a lot of these red wall voters have more of a memory and more of a habit of voting Labour than they do voting for any right wing party. And you're right. I mean, I think that we often forget, because now it's about 4 prime ministers ago, that these people came in under Boris Johnson, and they really didn't vote for the Conservative Party. They voted for Boris Johnson's Conservative Party.
They voted
And
to
that is
get Brexit done.
exactly right, and unite the country. And that was kind of, I mean, I think the source of so many of the Conservatives' current problem is that Boris Johnson built a coalition mainly off of kind of appeal to national unity and kind of the force of his own personality that simply can't be held together with kind of, Rishi Sunak. Especially when, for many people, the main threat to national unity actually is the Tories when it comes to the unity of the economy, rather than, Jeremy Corbyn or kind of the far left, which, now doesn't really seem like a real political force. So I think you're right. I think, a lot of those people actually will go back to Labour. And I think that, I think that we definitely will probably see, I mean, hopefully, some Labour gains in the Red Wall. I mean, the by-elections certainly seem to look like it's going that way, but you never know. That's the thing about elections.
Yeah. We've seen, by-elections obviously very different, but every single polling point, every single, by-election point, even throughout parts of the country that should be like really kind of true blue Tory, not really, part of that red wall calculus at all, have been going towards, I forget exactly the name of it, but it was like the group of 3 by-elections they had that was like, incredible, like Tory plus, 20, 30 seat that swung to, like a +6 Labour seat. And it was this really, really young, like gay guy, I believe, who won the seat there.
Oh, that's Keir Martha, right? That's Selby and Aisley.
Yes.
Selby and Aisley. Yes.
That was like, I think that was an example of a seat that's like, you would never ever expect Labour to win. So it seems like they're trying to get to, their high watermark, and that will definitely include seats like Ashfield and all up and down the red wall for sure. But that also does kind of play in a way of what we were talking about with immigration as well. Because it's Sunak, he has struggled to respond to this irregular migration kind of controversy, because that I feel like could be a bit more of a an effective, well foundationed, I guess, culture war. And I feel like to a certain extent, I don't think it really has to mean that you have like really day-to-day, life experience. If you see something, playing out in media, social media, on the TV, people are talking about it, and you just get the sense that because of this issue, your country, your quality of life, maybe even in just some abstract, completely irrational way, just through the power of the media, is degrading your quality of life. I feel like it could be a very, very motivating issue. But again, you do need I think the charismatic politicians working with the media to take it out. So do you think those forces, will align to make migration a big issue like it was, the 2015 kind of Brexit era?
I think I actually had this conversation the last time on the podcast that we talked about Lee Anderson.
Yeah, I believe yeah.
Yeah, and I think I still fundamentally think that, this is the problem with almost every single policy issue with the Tories now, is that you can bring up immigration, you can bring up the economy, you can bring up public services, you can bring up foreign policy. But the fundamental response that is very easy for anyone who's lived in this country to say is, well, what have you done about it for the last 14 years? Right? Because you've had all this time to fix it, and, for most people, it hasn't worked. So I think the Tories could do that if they were, in their first term or in their second term. But I think that they've had so much time to fix the problem. And it's been so public about stuff like the Rwanda policy, which, the vast majority of people I think now know is discredited, know won't work. The Tories have basically slowly and silently killed that policy now. I think that, they simply, with the record that they have, cannot run on the idea of kind of, Labour's going to, bring in millions of immigrants, especially when, Labour, in my opinion, actually has a pretty good immigration kind of stance of, talking more about processing, about making a deal with the EU, which seemed to, when it was announced, I think early last year, actually went down pretty well with the press and pretty well with the public. And so, I think that maybe they could have made that argument if the Labour Party was more left-wing on immigration, but I think that Keir Starmer was smart enough not to kind of have that left flank exposed, I think. So I think that actually I don't think that's going to be as big of an issue as people think it will be.
Yeah, I think he is, in a certain extent, very, very comparable to Joe Biden, because he has that definitely, I mean, he does kind of have, I guess, a left-wing kind of culture, but in the media, it came from a left-wing background, but in the media, I think he's done a very good job of, painting himself as the steady hand kind of very moderate guy, and just not really, when the conservative media tries to be, for example, in the U.S., just be like Joe Biden is a secret communist taking his orders from, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, people just don't really buy that, as they did, as they didn't really in 2020, and I don't think it's going to be really a big factor in the Republican line of attack in 2024. But if you and it depends. It's kind of come back a bit now because of the way things have gone in office. But I think if you're trying to paint those type of motivations on somebody who really just does not buy into them in public or in his kind of just general branding of himself and his party, I think it's going to be very, very challenging hill for them to climb. Yeah.
And I think also it's a thing of that kind of like, I think actually the left of British politics has actually really helped him with this, and the fact that kind of like, there's a lot of the far left really hate Keir Starmer, right? Like, when people see, Palestine protesters, which, most of the British public see as, pretty left wing, talking about how bad Keir Starmer was on Gaza, protesting him at meetings and at events, to the average moderate swing voter, to him, you can't really paint that person being protested by the left as a tool or puppet of the left. It's very hard to do it. And so I think that actually kind of both, I think Keir Starmer himself's kind of projection as a kind of strong kind of centrist figure, and also the fact that, rather than doing the smart thing and falling in with Keir Starmer, the radical left of British politics has tried to demonize him. I think it's actually made him a lot more credible as a kind of centrist figure than, if, say, Jeremy Corbyn said the same things that Keir Starmer did. I think that because of that support, or lack of support, makes it more kind of legitimate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have going from, the 10 pledges, which were, just a transparent attempt to, win over the labor base and then immediately change tack, as opposed to going, 40 years of just very left-wing, politics. I feel like it's definitely a harder swing for Jeremy Corbyn. It's almost comical to think about him coming out and saying some of Starmer's lines. I think some of the really a mass amount suspensions and expulsions and the treatment of the members of the Labour Party by this David Evans Keir Starmer regime have been quite influential in in fostering that relationship. I think if you have 60% of the membership vote, I think the far left, it's certainly possible getting a lot of people in the Labour Party falling behind you as kind of this uniting, this kind of Harold Wilson style figure. But it's something that Starmer has chosen not to do. And there are tons of other ways to attack Starmer. I feel like I think one of them is just being a flip flopper. Sir, I don't know, whatever name they tried to paint on him, but it's very hard to do.
Captain Hindsight, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was Boris Johnson thing.
Yeah, that was yeah. Then I think they tried to Sir Flip Flop or whatever. Like they always come up with these names that seem to be just purpose built for like Daily Mail covers, but it definitely also you need obviously the credibility on their other side of the Tories, which they just don't have at the moment, to also make that attack work. All right. We are going to, it's been obviously a little bit of time since we have been able to put out a show. And since then, the Rochdale by-election has taken place. It really was a pretty, remarkable result. It was built on, I think, really on, the Gaza situation. It was a kind of a three-way race, I guess you could say, in the start between Labour's Azahar Ali, George Galloway, I guess I think it's the Workers' Great Britain Party or something like that. He's running, and then Simon Danzig, who actually ended up didn't doing that well, and then there was a local independent who did pretty well. And I feel like definitely, I feel like I have followed George Galloway for a bit of time. Definitely not as long as he's been in British politics. It's been a pretty long time. He has said, he's definitely someone who is way more, socially conservative than I am, and I think at times a pretty, disgusting amount on what he said, especially with trans people and talking about a woman is a woman. But I think the Labour Party isn't particularly breaking any new ground on that at the moment as well. But you also got some really disgusting comments. For example, the ones that during the Naz Shah election in the mid 2000s, I believe it was, that was really I was just hearing those being like wow. But and also I think you also go ahead.
Oh, and I think also, I mean, this is kind of, I mean, Spencer's been billing this to me as my panic room, because I think he knows that, George Galloway is my worst nemesis. I think he is, if my life is a movie script, it's going to end with a pitched hand-to-hand combat with George Galloway. But I think that, yeah, I think that, he traffics off of division. I mean, in this campaign alone, there was a really good bylines investigation, actually going out canvassing with one of his kind of canvassers, showing that actually they only targeted kind of Muslim voters, and images of kind of leaflets that for non-Muslims was kind of more about kind of Muslim grooming gangs and kind of a lot of that kind of far right kind of Tommy Robinson rhetoric, and then for Muslims kind of this kind of targeted stuff about the Ummah and kind of starting with Assalamu alaikum and all this very kind of cringe pandering. And I actually know people who were campaigning against him in Batley and Spen, where campaigners for Labour received a huge amount of kind of physical assault, verbal abuse. The candidate there, who's LGBT, came under attack from not only George Galloway's campaign but also the far right, who was also pitching candidates up there because of her sexuality. So yeah, I think George Galloway, when it just comes to domestic politics, not even talking about how he, literally shook hands with Saddam Hussein and praised him after he, literally gassed and genocided, Kurds, and especially when you have a large Kurdish population in this UK. I mean, I can't imagine what it feels like right now to look at the results of someone like that getting elected, as a Kurdish British person. But I think, yeah, I think it is generally a very dark day for British democracy, and I think that the silver lining is that George Galloway has lost every single seat that he's won after a term, because he is actually not very good at delivering for the people of his constituencies, because he's not really there to. He's kind of just there to have a platform that he can use to siphon more money from the Russian and Iranian governments, which he constantly shills for and goes on their TV programs to, talk conspiracy theories on. So hopefully I think that he will be off the political scene rather soon. But I think, for now, you're going to have, people in Rochdale who are just normal voters, who mainly their day-to-day issues aren't Gaza. It's, public services, it's the economy, it's transportation. And, when they need an MP to kind of do casework or sort out social housing, they're not going to have that connection to a government or a political party that can actually affect policy, because they're stuck with, someone who's going to be, licking the boot of authoritarians. Yeah. Rant over.
Yeah. I guess like that does kind of set up very well, I think, the second part of that point. And it's like, I think George Galloway, despite all his definitely many deep character flaws that I think it's any reasonable left-wing person can and should admit, is that he has been, an incredible voice of just challenging and really reason at times of like the worst parts of the Iraq War, and then again throughout the situation in Gaza. With we see from his Senate protest, from all the various things, and times that he has come out, or not a Senate protest, his Senate testimony, and I feel like. This is another example where when there's a major gap in, something what like Labor is doing with the, their policy towards Gaza, you can have someone like Keir Starmer, who campaigned a lot on Gaza, and according to, his campaign people, we're seeing not just Muslim support on the Gaza issue, but also from some, white British voters who were coming out and saying, enough is enough. I feel like that is going to be a perfect time where you're going to allow somebody like George Galloway to come through, use his voice, use his, someone who is not afraid of the, mainstream media avalanche and tsunami of just, when you really get them all kind of in a froth, the way that Jeremy Corbyn was throughout his time. And I feel like you're going to have, I feel like it's going to be up for, the voters to, tell. And I think it's going to be it'll be interesting to see how he does with, I think the Gaza election, the issue is going to be still a very poignant issue in UK politics in, another year. So if it's going to be interesting to see if he can hold on to that seat with, the obviously heavily Muslim population. But I think, the reaction to it, to his election, this kind of like, kind of in some ways patronizing, in some ways, just kind of calling, I think, diminishing the intelligence of the voters of Rochdale. Like, they voted for this guy. They may not vote for him again in 2024, but the fact that he in the election, but the fact that he has this massive majority, and the fact that, oh, it's so sad for the people. It's like, I feel like they voted for him, to send a message. They voted for him to be, kind of a more direct, more effective. And I feel like the fact that he was able to get through is, I think, is something that, Labor, I would assume and should be taking a lot of lessons from. And also, I think for example, the thing about freaking out about, oh, he's micro targeting certain voters. I feel like that is just like the way in the two different leaflets we saw. One of them was the kind of like from someone like George Galloway, who looks like he does and talks like he does, starting a letter out with assalamu alaikum, is a little bit makes me kind of like laugh a little bit. But he's the only person who is, I think, in British politics right now showing the Muslim community genuine attention, genuine, acting like he gives, two dams about the situation in Gaza at the moment. And it's like, if you look at the other leaflet at the same time, you're talking about revitalizing the football club, opening up a new, approving the A&E service. It's just these kind of, it is these kind of, bread and butter issues. And I feel like, this, instead of just acting like he's, the devil coming down the road, I feel like is probably not the most, productive way. If I was Keir Starmer, I'd be like, this guy done some, disgusting things. We want to put, by the way, a better candidate who we're not going to, or is not going to, say October 7th was an inside job, and then we're going to come out, defend him the next day. Then the recording comes out, then we drop him. We're not going to do that this time. And we're going to, stop, it's like that micro-targeting thing. It gets me because it's just like, is that really like something that in the UK is that crazy?
It is. Because I got to stop you because I do a lot of things generally personally. And usually we don't do micro-targeting, usually the way that most parties do campaigning. And I think there's actually something that I'm really proud of as, someone who is actively part of like British democracy, is that actually we don't do micro-targeting based on race. We don't have these conversations about the black vote or the Hispanic vote or the Latino vote. We target based on who is eligible to vote and who is voted, ideologically similar to us in the past. And I think it's good that democracy in this country is about what you believe rather than who you are. And I think that is something that is, an unwelcome innovation. I don't even think it is an innovation from George Galloway. I mean, I think that is definitely the message that George Galloway wants people to hear. I mean, I think that he was not anti-Iraq war. He was pro one side of the Iraq war, which was the side of Saddam Hussein, which is why he actively went and said before the war that he is behind him and he supports him. I question his support of Palestine, especially because, when Russia is illegally occupying and genociding Ukrainians, he seems to be very supportive of that. So it doesn't really seem that he has a moral opposition to genocide and illegal occupations. He seems to just have a problem with, he seems to see it as a political, of a way of getting political points. And again, when his best friend Saddam Hussein expelled, Palestinian workers from Kuwait, he didn't seem to have any problems of meeting with him and praising him afterwards. So I hear of the Palestinian people. He's not. But I think that, I think that the lessons and the electoral lessons learned simply doesn't make any sense in this case. The electoral lesson is if the Tory party, if you're in a seat and the Tory party is basically never going to win anyway, and the main Labour candidate drops out, then you might have an independent winning, which is kind of a common sense. Like, if the two parties that people usually vote for aren't in the running, really, then yeah, an independent is going to win. But I don't think that that's condescending. I don't think that that is necessarily kind of demeaning Muslim voters' intelligence. I think it's more demeaning of Muslim voters' intelligence to go and say that they are basically these kind of robots who, because of their religion, only care about this one issue more than anyone else. I mean, I think that, again, most Muslim voters are normal human beings. They get up in the morning, they go about their day like everyone else. And while, yes, definitely issues like Gaza does have an important place for them in how they see the world and how they see politics, that doesn't mean that they are solely voting on that issue, especially when it comes to their MP, who they know, because they're smart enough, isn't going to actually have an impact on a conflict that is 4,000 miles away, right? So I think that it was more because they didn't actually have a real choice then that they kind of, wanted to vote or, really desired to vote for this kind of, whole.
We have a little bit of a call drop issue there with some glitching out there. on Myron's end. We'll just give him a second to get back on there.
We do hopefully, when the election happens this year, we're going to be standing a candidate in Rochdale. And personally, I can't wait to book my train ticket up there and help get George Galloway out of Parliament. Because I think that he is genuinely a threat to democracy, and I don't think that's an overstatement. I think someone who actively supports regimes that try to invade and conquer and occupy and genocide democratic countries is a threat to democracy, and I think that we should take that more seriously. Sorry for the rant again.
Again, no, it is totally okay. Yeah, that definitely. I think that's there are some. I think with the microtargets, like I can think of other examples. Like even in we have the Brexit. Facebook ads for Brexit. We had the targeting specifically of, British Indian communities about Labour's position in Kashmir in 2019. There are, it's definitely more of a localized, more kind of campaigning system, the broader national, targeted Facebook ads that we see, Obama started doing it in 2008. Like he was one of the first people to really pioneer. It's like a different political system, in America. I would acknowledge that. But I feel like also, again, it's not necessarily like those conflict, and of course I think Galloway would come and back and say that I'm not supportive of. I think also some of the stuff that his kissing up and his like defense of Putin there just is not based in reality. But I think a lot of the stuff he said, being the kind of the forewarner, to Tony Blair, being that voice, he's definitely not the most perfect voice, but then he also exists when there is a vacuum to be filled. I think any human being, regardless of whether who is following the situation, who is informed about the situation in Gaza, and sees their government supporting this, is going to be think about it very long and hard when they step in the voting booth. And even if George Galloway is not going to be connected to a party, having that voice in Parliament. Having his vote in Parliament, to whatever extent that may be helpful, I think is going to be something that those people, in Rochdale. By the way, he didn't just eke it out; he won by quite a fair bit. Are going to be valuing very, very much. Just as the guest of the show, do you want to give you a quick last word to respond if you want?
I mean, again, I just think that. I think that. Again, if it is in response to the government's policy on Gaza, I do not understand why. I mean, it can't be because again, this was not.
I think it's not. I think he also
ran an
effective
seat,
local
right?
campaign.
It wasn't a conservative seat, and it was not a protest against the conservatives, right? The circumstances is not that it was a normal by-election, and Muslims naturally went out and voted for this explicitly pro-Gaza candidate because out of the choices that they had of the major parties and this Gaza candidate, they voted for the Gaza one. It's that they were stripped because of mistakes that were made by the Labour Party, mistakes that were made by, I think, a lot of the major parties and by a lot of the candidates in this race, that they were basically given the options of free independence, right? Free independence and a Lib Dem and a Tory who wasn't going to win. And they took one of the independents, right? So I think that the lessons that can be learned for the other 629 seats in the UK are very, very slim and are very, very little. And I think that fundamentally, I think that the Muslim. I think that general, regardless of religion, I think that the voters of Rochdale are smart enough to know who George Galloway is, to know the kind of person that he is. I think that, he has done this in Muslim constituencies across the country before. I'm not saying that all Muslim voters know all other Muslim voters, but they know people like this. They know what people like this are after. And I think that if they were given a strong, solid, decent Labour candidate, which the polls before the candidate dropped out did see that they were leading, right? I think that if they were given a strong, decent Labour candidate, that George Galloway would not be in power. And I think that what it does show is the importance of actually, having a strong, principled, decent opposition. Because when you don't, you just let the crazies on the far left who, again, kiss the boots of dictators. Meeting with Saddam Hussein was not a mistake. Saddam met with, not Saddam, but George Galloway met with, Bashar al-Assad when he was gassing children in Syria. He praised Donald Trump as being a leader of the anti-war movement on his show on Russia Today when he was taking money from Vladimir Putin, right? This guy is a serial friend of oppressors and a serial bootlicker of oppressors. And I think that the Muslim people, especially through all of the kind of oppression that they've had in this country, we were just talking about preventing that kind of stuff, know someone who is against their interests and who is for the oppression of them when it suits them, when they see one. And I think that they, in the next election, will see George Galloway as that person.
Yeah, we will see. I think, the size of that, it was, I think if I would have subscribed more to what you were saying if he hadn't won in the way that he had won. And I think, the aspect of right to resist the American invasion in Iraq, which I think was something that he supported to a degree that was much stronger. I think that's something that's definitely going to be that's definitely a valid thing to come up and say, if you're Iraqi, if you're dealing with a situation that you're dealing with, I would join the counterinsurgency if you have American troops doing what they did and committing a really, really horrific crime there. But I feel
but it wasn't about joining the counterinsurgency because remember, this meeting was before the Iraq War, so it wasn't when there was a counterinsurgency against the U.S. occupation. It was before there was even a U.S. occupation, and it was that he went to Saddam Hussein's palace while he was still in power and said, "Sir, you are a man of honor and of integrity, and I stand by you." And this was when, again, a couple of years before, he was literally gassing Kurds. And at the same time, when he was meeting him in Baghdad, he was still torturing political dissidents. So this is not about, he was not talking about resisting oppression. He was literally meeting with the oppressor of the Iraqi people. And I think that the Iraqi people deserve for that record to be put straight. That, just because their name is next to the leader at the United Nations does not mean that that leader represents their interests. And so many times when those leaders of Russia, of Syria, of Iraq, of Iran have not represented their interests, George Galloway has gone down and kissed the ring anyway. But I know that we're probably running out of time, I assume.
We're at 45. Again, we definitely go on in this and like the back and forth about what he did, and we both, I would say also he's definitely said some and believes some things that I definitely do not believe, especially from trans people to Russia and all that stuff. But again, I think the bottom line is he is able to thrive when there is a massive kind of hole at the heart of the UK Labour Party on a major issue, which I think with Gaza there definitely is, and that is why I think it definitely represents a protest vote towards the Labour Party and their position of Gaza from what is a pretty essential community towards their broader coalition throughout a lot of these safe seats. All right, yeah.
I think we'll have to, as they say on the Western politics, disagree agreeably. But I think that
agreed, all that stuff. Yeah, we'll probably have very many conversations about this in the future. But it's time to move to the important stuff, the stuff we've all been waiting for. Kate Middleton, absolutely crazy story. So she essentially, it's been a bit of a drama, a bit of a back and forth over the past. I think a month or so it was. She was in the hospital. She was having abdominal surgery. She was recovering from that. She was not seen in public, I think, for about 25 days or whatever it was. And then she releases this photo there was a photo sold to TMZ of her in the car. Which I think for some reason I feel like that should have kind of debunked it, but obviously who knows the provenance of that when it gets to TMZ. But there is also rumors swirling around, and the British press has this policy of just not doing we don't do the TMZ tabloid pictures, as they would say. The
Oscars is already over. The best accent award's already gone. I'm sorry.
I'll get them next year. No, but it has been, they have that policy. So I think then she comes out a few nights ago with this picture of her and her family, very cute picture, but people start to, first it's the amateur internet experts starting to say, this looks a little Photoshop, this looks a little sketchy. And, of course you see them as kind of, conspiracy, half of them probably think she's like, some half reptile or something crazy like that. But then we have the AP, the AFP, all these agencies that send pictures to various newspapers around the world who can't, don't have the resources to go and take them and gives them to them for like a subscription. They say to all these newspapers around, U.S., around the world, U.K., whatever, do not run this story. We believe it is the source, which is literally Kensington Palace, manipulated the image. And then, it starts to be like, what the hell is going on? And then Kate Middleton comes out with just absolutely kind of hilarious tweet about like many amateur photographers, I've occasionally experimented with image editing. I think was something along the words that she said. just coming out there, really right out there and saying it in a very, just casual way, like she expected nobody to really, notice or think that much of it, which I found most fascinating. What do you think of this story, just generally, and just get your general reaction on it?
I think this is what I love about the monarchy because I mean usually in like America, right, when there's a slow news day, like they have to just like make some shit up or just have to like they have to like make up like Obama wearing a tan suit or something.
Yeah.
And it means that like the president has to like do a whole statement about it and it wastes a ton of time with the people who actually like have work to do. But the weird thing about the monarchy is that like it's official enough that like when they do stupid shit that actually has no consequence on like the country whatsoever, there's always kind of red meat for kind of the press to kind of like feed on, and so there's no kind of there's no need to kind of have very like trivial stories about politicians because we just have very trivial stories about the royals like every other week. So the great institution of the monarchy doing its damnedest once again to protect the constitutional order. But no, I think it's very. I mean, I do genuinely want to understand what is going on with Kate Middleton because, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I hope she's okay. I mean, I don't buy that she's an amateur photographer. I mean, I do know Prince William did get an A level in art,
Huh.
so I mean that's kind of plausible. But maybe it was maybe she sent the image to Will and he used the magic eraser on Google Pixel or something to change the pictures. But I think yeah, I mean I just hope she's okay. But it's funny. It's funny. If only she had offered her amateur photography skills to Prince Andrew, I think it would have helped him in
Yeah,
a lot of
that,
situations.
or maybe not. Yeah, that would have made
Maybe
some
not.
of
Yeah,
the
maybe actually, yeah. She's using her powers for good. She's very selective. She understands the great power, great
yeah the
responsibility.
great power
Um,
of causing PR crises with
yeah,
poor photo editing. Yeah, because it's just like it is such an like really inexplicable situation because it's like probably the Occam's razor situation is she's just like fine, she like doesn't really want to just having a chill situation, maybe from a procedure that maybe is a little more embarrassing than than they would like to release publicly at the moment. But then it's like you get this completely edited photo that's just so weird, and then she just kind of comes out and says it, and the implication is she's just a really big Photoshop fan, or loves getting Photoshop, just kind of on the low like that. Very, very just like totally out of left field stuff. But also, yeah, like you said, is it just a really kind of an incredible outlet for just media stories. Even I feel like when there's not a slow news day, I feel like they definitely treat it, the UK media a little bit kind of like laughably seriously. But it is a good outlet for this kind of the just the fun stuff that we can all kind of laugh about at the end of like a show like this.
Yeah, I mean, really, it is because of podcasts like Hell Island that the Royals industrial media complex exists. I
Yeah.
think we're doing our part. We are.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
mm,
Yeah, and yeah, even like from all the kind of UK media and just like people even in America on like there's like I feel like there's the Royals are very popular with like maybe 28 to 46 or like 28 to like 55-year-old women. Really do kind of follow up more closely. Like, what's Kate Middleton wearing? Like, watching my mom was up early watching Kate Middleton's wedding,
yeah.
and so it's like. But I feel like when it gets over to the broader community in America, that's how you know it's kind of a big deal. And this definitely did because it's just like a PR strategy of just essentially coming out and saying the thing because really I think they had to at a certain point when that killer notification came out from the AP, and just coming out and saying it is just very very just like you don't see that often, which is a very very interesting and eye catching, I would say.
Yeah. And hey, it's good. As with everything in the monarchy, it's good soft power, right? Like the fact that it's all of the fact that people are talking about Britain in a sense of kind of well, not in a negative sense, but in the sense of like this funny royal who's like bad at Photoshop. And the fact that people in the most powerful country in the world like genuinely for some reason genuinely care about these kind of things. It's I wouldn't say it's good for Britain's image in the world. Maybe if it would have been photoshopped more convincingly, it might have been. But
Yeah.
I didn't notice it. I didn't. Did you notice it when like before they told you that like it was edited? Did you like think
I was
that's a
definitely
bit dodgy.
zooming in on it because I was seeing, some people being like, "Oh, this could be fake. Like, are the trees, would they really be in full bloom in November and stuff like that?" And like, the New York Times had this like Instagram post where they were just like, zooming in on like, this is where her sweater, doesn't match up with the shirt, and it was like, it was very like, it was definitely starting to go. But I feel like. I feel like I wouldn't have had the the expertise, and I think it was probably, I guess the truest sense of the word, it would brought to my attention when some of the stuff like some of the questions were already starting to be raised.
Yeah, but I think it also does show how important still actually kind of a lot of people slag off the importance of like the mainstream media and the kind of sense of trust, but I think that kind of actually situations like this still show that they actually do still have like a huge amount of power and kind of responsibility, and that actually they do still have a very kind of useful place in kind of notifying, because if this was just taken by like Kate Middleton and posted on her Instagram account, and it wasn't kind of done through kind of the Associated Press, and there weren't these kind of like standards of kind of journalistic integrity, we probably wouldn't. I mean they probably would have just like turned into like a kind of micro niche kind of conspiracy theory on the internet. It wouldn't have been kind of validated. So I
Yeah.
mean, me out here repping for the most vulnerable and oppressed, the mainstream media.
Yeah, the
Uh,
mainstream media and the royal family. Yeah,
yeah,
catching them both. Yeah. All right.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, Myron, thank you so much for joining us here today. We're trying to
Pleasure.
do this again in next Tuesday, so hopefully we will see
Hopefully.
you then. This has been Hell Island.
All right. See ya.